Hello and welcome to the Rubber Duck Dev Show. I'm Chris.
I'm Creston.
And I'm Nick, aka Schwad.
And we are excited today because we get to talk about Scarpe, which is fun new stuff in the Ruby world. So we appreciate you being here, Nick. I'm looking forward to chatting about this, and we are going to have a lot of fun today. But before we get into that, week in review. Creston, how was your week?
Pretty productive, although I was pulling my hair out with a Zoom integration. So my SaaS app I'm trying to integrate with Zoom, or working towards the process of doing that. And they've introduced this marketplace. And I'm like, what is it with all these companies introducing these marketplaces that you have to get on? You have to go through security reviews. I mean, like, I understand Salesforce because I was looking at the Salesforce integration, and that is like the amount of hoops you have to jump through is significant. But like integrating for like Stripe or so many other types of companies, you can do it really easy, really quickly, the integration. But with this, you have to do this whole process flow. And if you want to get on the marketplace, you have to submit all of this security related documentations and what are your coding practices like, and.
Yeah.
But I did find that there's a way to do, because I really don't have a need to be on the marketplace. I have more enterprisey customers, and they actually offer what they call a server to server integration, where basically the administrator of the Zoom account creates an application there. With that, they just provide you 3 keys essentially. And then if you put those keys with another provider, you can interface with the API and do what you need to do. So I'm like, that's what I'm going to do, at least for version 1. And if later the clients that I have say, we really want you to be in the marketplace, like, okay, I'll bite the bullet and do that. But holy cow, some of the companies and the infrastructure they've built up, and to start to get to work with them is becoming insane. Anyway, that's my rant. and a significant part of worry and a lot of work this week. But what about you?
So I actually have some fun show and tell this week for this.
Oh boy.
So I've been working on the wave function collap algorithm in Ruby. Collapse. Yeah, collap is a word.
Collap.
I'm so excited I'm getting ahead of myself. But I've been working on that algorithm, and I finally got it implemented, the basics of it, and added some probability. And one of the guys in the Dragon Ruby community took that algorithm and started generating maps with it, and it just blew my mind. So he was able to put this together with just a tiny little set of tiles, like 9 different tiles. He was able to get the thing to automatically generate procedurally generated maps, and he could change the probabilities of the tiles and get it to generate all kinds of stuff.
Whoa.
And that was just that was nuts. That, it was pretty cool too that I got to be a part of putting that together. But this just blows my mind. I love procedural generation of stuff and AI, so this kind of stuff is really just blows me away. But anyway, that's my fun, exciting thing for the week. What about you, Nick?
Yeah, I'm here in Belfast, despite my bizarre American accent. Obviously, it's 8 p.m. here, so I've kind of been run off my feet this last week because, so I'm remote. Y'all are remote all the time, or home in an office sometimes.
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
Yeah, predominantly home office. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in a co-working space. I mean, I pay for 8 days a month, but let's be honest, sometimes you don't get into 2 days a week. And so I'm in one of those stretches where I've been home quite a bit, and then my weekends I've been home quite a bit, and then the weekends have been oriented in this room quite a bit. So I'm like, at that kind of, I need to get out and touch grass or something. But I decided So after like 4 different places my wife and I lived, 8 years together here, I never sorted out my workspace. So I've decided to do an office rewrite, which started last weekend, and it was like 8 hours Saturday, 7 hours Sunday, plus the whole like cooking and being a normal adult, you know. No kids, thank God, but I will not thank God, but you know what I mean, like no kids as well.
Yeah.
But like this would have taken twice as long, right? But it
Right.
was still like every second. So I was all Saturday and Sunday, just, you know, took everything I ever owned out of here except for the desks, deep clean, wiped everything down. You know, underneath my desk, nobody knows. That's the worst bit. Cable City, right?
Yeah.
Like everything's tangled. I had a not even nice, an old record player that was like probably cost like very little money, but it was belonged to my granddad, but it didn't work. So I had it like on the floor, but it was huge. And I took it all out, and I've been just slowly putting things back, but like one item at a time. I gotta tell you, I reviewed the cable pile. There's, I don't know, maybe 150, 200 cables. And I gotta tell you, if you lay them all out and you zip tie them all nice and stuff, you can dedupe 70% of them away.
Yep.
I have thrown away 2 that I discovered I needed now. So that always happens. So I'm gonna have to buy 2 more cables back, but it's worth it, right? So like, I've just got to, you know, all the cables you could need. I've got about 7 different kinds, but I've got like 3 of each zip tied up. The ones that I'm using are in place, right? Cable management systems, like you can't really see it. You just see, oh, it doesn't look too bad, but like on the floor, all the cables are off the floor. There's nothing under. So it's like for me, right? But the problem is once you start like a project, you probably know how this goes, living at home, and you know, you work in here 9 to 5 or whatever your hours are, and then you go straight into that. And I'm ready to be done. Just a bit to go. Maybe this weekend I'll be done. So anyway, my job isn't what's been wearing me out. It's that. And then also I'm quite excited. I'll probably talk about this later today, but organizing a hack days for Scarpe next week. We have 2 Google Summer of Code contributors this summer, so they've been fun to work with, and we're just getting ready we're gonna have a music theme, so just build desktop apps that do music things. You know, like maybe a looper, maybe you know, equalizer, maybe something where you can hum and it'll tell you what note you're doing, stuff like that. So, but anyway, that's my week. Really at the moment, it's like, I don't know, the best comparison, I grew up in the Rocky Mountains. The best comparison I can think of this office thing is hiking. So like when you're hiking, it's to me the worst thing in the world. Like when you're at 2 miles up, you know, doing a 2,000-foot climb, and you just hate yourself. But afterwards you get this like amnesia, and you're like, hiking is amazing. I love hiking so much. Right. I want to hike more. So like right now I'm at like 800 feet from the summit, and I just don't want to go anymore. I want to go back down the mountain.
But you just got to get that. You got to get to that feeling at the end.
Yeah, I guess the one good thing to tidy up the end of this rant is because I didn't do it all in one day. I'm getting to see how empty and clean like I live in the UK, so I don't get to have a shed or a garage or anything. So like the tools would be in here. So like, you know, every tool is very carefully placed that I own, right? So yeah, so like seeing how nice it is, it makes it a lot easier to throw crap out, because I'm like, yep, grandma gave me that toy when I was 4. We'll find a shelf for it somewhere else. It's not going back in here. Sorry, grandma.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, this is the magic zone or whatever, creative zone.
So welcome, chat. Hey, Wildfiler, Levi, what's happening? We are going to talk about Scarpe. We're going to do a little Scarpe Diem today.
Yes, you know it. You know the slogan.
Yeah. Seize the shoes.
Yeah.
So we will, and for those of you that don't know, Scarpe, my understanding means shoes in Italian, right?
That's right. Yeah. So the person who kind of helped kick us into gear is from Sicily, and so that was the idea. And then so Scarpe Diem, you know, get the Latin mix in there. It's taken, by the way. Scarpe Diem, I believe, .com is a shoe store in LA. So
Oh,
somebody
man.
else had the same thought. But we're not incorporated. You can't, what are you gonna do, sue us?
Yeah, right. I'm suing you, OSS.
Oh no. I mean, we can agree, like, it's so freeing to not make money on something ever.
Yeah.
And no, there's no way I can see ever getting financial incentive off this, which makes it really fun. Right.
Yeah.
Like playing guitar.
Exactly.
No one's gonna pay me to do that.
It's not a job, so it's fun.
Well, yeah, I'm that kind of person, right? You may have seen on the socials, I've been selling mugs at cost that I with an AI image I generated. Like I'm that kind of person.
Yeah.
So
all right. So what we're talking about, for those of you that don't know, is this little beauty of a repo, Scarpe. So it's under Scarpe Team Scarpe. And we are going to talk about this. So tell us a little bit about what this is, what it does, why I want it.
I'll give you the history. It's all is proper OSS. It's all stolen ideas. None of it's really me. I'm just the heart, or I don't know. Like we have a few people who hack together, and I don't really know what the term is for me because there's people who are starting to do much more technical PRs than me, and sometimes quite more than me. But I don't know what that role is. Is it the founder role or the maintainer role? Like the vision? I don't know.
Sure.
Anyway,
all those things.
Like, for example, I don't know if you'll see this, but Noah Gibbs, who wrote Rebuilding Rails, if you know that book, has been doing a lot of technical heavy lifting. So I feel weird saying like, yeah, I'm good. You know, like when you create something and then it gets enough interest that contributors come in and start like really making a difference. Like, for example, if you look at the top contributors on Rails, right? Like Rafael Franza, he didn't start it, but now he's done the most for it.
Yeah.
But what do you want? What's the story? Sorry,
maybe you're the shepherd or the herder of cats or whatever you want to call it.
Cat herder.
Yeah.
I know. It is, yeah, like we don't have a structure. We're just a group of people having fun in a corner. Because I will say, before I say anything, if anyone's watching this now or in the future, we aren't trying to be great, the best thing in the world. Glimmer, everything Glimmer for writing desktop apps in Ruby today is very well done. And if you want to be big corporate success, I don't know if corporate's the right word, but like they won the Fukuoka Award, which is the government annual Ruby award out of Japan in 2022. And they have a lot of different ways to write desktop apps with Ruby. You know, even ones like using Opal, using libui, like using a lot of different techniques. I just want anyone here to not think that I'm trying to proclaim that we have this territory. We certainly do not. However, we're still here. We're playing a different game. We're a group of people in a room trying to have fun and be whimsical. If you start to look at some of the names that we're developing in here, you know, we extracted something into a gem and we called it lacchi or lacci, which is Italian for shoelaces instead of saying shoelaces. We've got something called Cat's Cradle. We create apps for ourselves called like Highlander. You know, we're just having a good time.
Yeah.
And the big history, I'm going to go for like, it's not going to be the whole hour, but just for a minute or two, like ground zero. I don't know what Nick's talking about at all. In 2007, there was a Ruby engineer, a coder, rather artist called Y the Lucky Stiff, who went by that moniker until he disappeared in 2009. And he one day just wrote this blog post called shoes. And he revealed to the world this library that let you in Ruby with nothing but Ruby to write in a few lines a working desktop application in 2007 for Mac machines, Windows machines, Linux machines. And it just worked out of the box. Because he saw, the thing about Y is he knew how to write desktop apps natively in Mac and Linux and Windows. And he knew the power of Ruby and the promise of Ruby. Mm-hmm. My thing that I keep harping on is the ratio of implementation details to business logic. You you know, I won't show you today, but you could look at simple desktop applications and popular things, libuic, GTK. I guess I could ask you later if you folks have used some of these tools in the past. And you just think about somebody the first time they want to communicate with a computer. And back then you weren't thinking, I want to build a website. You're like, I want to build a thing on my computer. You know, you get your CD from the store, you buy it in a box and the manual, and you stick it in your computer and it runs. So that's what you're thinking. And that's what it was optimized for. So in 3 lines, you could have a desktop app, and that includes end. And it did really well. The DSL, as with anything with Y, was very tasteful. It was engineered towards the, you know, with a lot of Rubyisms and thinking about the coder and what they want to build first, and working back from that. And I guess the story about how we came about is Y disappeared in 2009. And then Shoes had an interesting history where there was Shoes 3, it's still there. And then there's work by some wonderful engineers for Shoes 4, which actually was a rewrite with JRuby and some very well, we're taking a lot of looks at this code using SWT. So that would be the Java popular, I don't remember, it's something widget toolbox, right? Like
Right.
the Java way to write desktop apps, and it's very well written. Some names that you'd recognize on there. And if you want a good history, Daniel Clark has a 2017 Ruby conf video that gives you all the history with Shoes 4 and everything leading up to it. What's the state with that at the minute is they did like half a dozen release candidates in 2017 and never got past release candidate. And that's been it. So my first application I ever wrote was not a web app or a Rails app. It was a Shoes app in 2014. It still worked properly then. So that was it. It's this beautiful thing that was ahead of its time. It's kind of like the Romans losing concrete and then it disappeared for like 1,000 years. You know what I mean?
Right.
It was good. It never stopped being good, right? The syntax never stopped making sense. For example, if you ever use no-cogiri, that's why syntax, which was adopted off of HPRCOT, which he built.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of stuff that we use. Same with Cite and Ruby for YAML. So I pitched to my, I'll link this to today now. I pitched to a team of mine about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago. And I said exactly what I said to you, except I showed clips of the manual. Maybe we'll look at that a little later. If you Google "Nobody Knows Shoes" PDF, you can find it in about 2 seconds. Y wrote a stellar manual that is on the same tier as his other writing, A Poignant Guide to Ruby. And I did this whole pitch to my team just for a show and tell, 5 minutes, really fun. And someone on my team was like, hey, that obviously the DSL is still good. It's just the back end couldn't keep up for 17 years, you know. The tooling's gotten better, right? Like you can write HTML and JavaScript and CSS desktop apps, even though they may take all your memory or whatever, you know, Electron, stuff like that. Like people have improved the ecosystem around what was hard to maintain. So WebView was the tool that Marco looked at and put up WebView Ruby, which gave us Ruby bindings to talk to WebView, and then we can speak HTML to that and build. And the really cool promise of, so basically writing again, calling it Scarpe. But the really interesting thing here for getting contributions is we can say, do you know, or are you able to Google about how Ruby works? Do you know, or are you able to easily Google about how to HTML? Maybe CSS a bit. Unlikely, but possibly a JavaScript. That's a lot better, right? There are 10 to 1 web developers to desktop developers coming out in the market today. So you're like, hey, this is quite buildable. And then somebody can look at a snippet of code and be like, oh, this is the HTML that is represented by this. So we can talk HTML to think in squares and buttons and images, but we can implement that DSL one bit at a time. So in February, we had a hack days. That was internal to my company, Shopify, but we did it as an external one as well with all my friends that I could find. We're like, let's just like Marco initted the app like for me. So he gave like a hello world, like para is the thing. And then it's, thank you very much for sharing that PDF. Para hello world. And it ran, right? So we knew where to start adding all the methods, start building the things out, and then having huge debates about the architecture. And we got about 130 PRs out of a dozen contributors in 3 days.
Wow.
And I thought we would die off, but we kept trucking. There's been a core of us. We got a Discord. I'll shout out, we actually have an equal link, join scarpe.schwad.org will take you to the Discord. It's the invite, so you can remember it. Yeah, and then at one point, we were just filing more PRs in, and someone said, "Hey, should we apply to be a project at Google Summer of Code?" And I'm sorry, I'm going to show my maybe not age but ignorance. I was like, "What's Google Summer of Code? I've never heard of this thing." And we got accepted to the Ruby organization, and for summer contributors, I think got as many as anyone else. It's like JRuby and Truffle Ruby, maybe half of them.
Wow.
Like we got a lot of applications. Yeah, so we accepted 2 contributors, Pawan and Giovanni. Giovanni's been looking into Scarpe on WASM.
Oh, wow.
Yep, and then that's not as public facing yet, and I haven't been mentoring him, so I haven't seen as much of that. But Pawan has been just crushing it with adding to the DSL and stuff. So kind of bringing it to the present day, the 2 things I'd say is our contribution approach is not issue and project driven. It is, I have used my Ruby archaeology skills to find maybe 250 shoes apps, like example apps.
Mm-hmm.
And our process is pass them, make them pass. Write what you need to do to make it run. And we have a CI that checks if the past ones crash. Like we're getting better with our testing for like capybara level, but that's what we're having people do. And Pawan and myself, and making improvements as we go. We're just like, okay, this one has a border. Oh shoot, we don't have border DSL yet. Let's add the border. Oh, this one has, stacks in this order. Well, we don't support stacks in this order. Let's do that. So that's what we're doing now. And then our big thing, and everybody watching is invited, Wednesday to Thursday next week. We are doing a hack days with a theme of music, where we're also building apps for fun, right? Like for ourselves to enjoy. And what I always, sorry, this is a big story. I'm doing it all in one. I apologize, Chris.
That's all right.
But the other story is, I say to people, it's not just about building the framework. I really want people just to use it. So my thing, I don't know if you've ever heard of lucid dreaming, where you're aware of, okay, there's a trick. I'm not super into it, but there's 2 tricks that people do. It's like get in the habit of turning a light off and on, or like really focus on text and make sure that you can read it. Because if you do that in your dream, a dream can't render pitch blackness, right? So if it just dims the room a bit and you snap out, you're like, I'm dreaming. Or if you look really close, like, I don't know, maybe if you're playing a video game in a dream, that doesn't, I can't read that at all. And then, I'm dreaming. What I've said to my engineers is, when you are writing a cool Ruby script or a Bash script or something, like a one-liner that does something crazy, have that happen to you and think, could that be a simple desktop app? I may have you click into one today, which will be an example.
Cool.
But think about all the things that if you weren't a coder, you wouldn't be able to do, and that there might be some grandma or aunt or somebody out there who would have a computer who would like to be able to do what you can do, like renaming all your files to have hello at the front of them or something. Yeah, so that's so we're going to be building apps and maybe the functionality to support just music desktop applications. So there you go, Chris. That's how we got to this point. And my big sale is, it's just desktop application development made very simple. We aren't there with the DSL. I mean, we're an implementation of it. We've got a long ways to go. We, We don't have packaging yet, right? Like there's a lot, I can tell you all the things we want to do, but we're really trucking along, okay? So
Yeah.
like you can do fun stuff today, yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about what this actually does. So we're talking about desktop application development. So all the desktop elements, buttons and windows and all that fun jazz that you don't want to draw by hand.
Yep.
Is kind of what we're putting together here. So like here's an example of, hey, you've got a push me button. Huzzah. Which is great because Ruby, I think one of the reasons shoes may have kind of fallen by the wayside, as great as it was, is because the Ruby ecosystem was so dominated by web development that nobody was really paying attention to the desktop applications of Ruby. It was kind of more of a niche type of area to be in. But what I'm starting to discover, having started working with Dragon Ruby and learning different ways to use Ruby and things other than web development, is that Ruby doesn't need to be consigned to a web dev ecosystem. It's an extraordinarily powerful language that can do lots of stuff, including build games and desktop apps. So there's this other couple more examples here of doing all kinds of things with shoes. And I'm assuming Scarpe will be following this kind of model here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say there's interesting, we are not going to change anything. Like one of our big things is we're not going to change this DSL. But there are things that have huge potential going forward. One of them is, since we are using web, you know how like you can just drop Bootstrap into something and make it look a lot nicer and more professional, maybe than say what we're seeing here. There's possibility of like you writing a widget or an extension, and that you just literally can include that in very easily, right? And maybe you could, because it's built to support your own widgets if you want to write your own widgets too. So instead of a stack and a flow, which are the grid methods, you could have stack bootstrap stack, and it'll be exactly a stack, but you can take in a parameter of like call MD3, and things like that, and define your column width and everything in bootstrap style. Have your fonts to that style. Yeah. So it's
So when I started looking into Scarpe more as I was, kind of getting ready for the show, one of the things that I started kind of brainstorming on last week, because I've been really deep into the Dragon Ruby stuff lately, and one of the things that's kind of painful about game dev is drawing all the, you got to draw a button, you got to draw all the stuff, you got to put it all together. And so I was sitting there thinking, this is essentially a GUI designer. What's other than the fact that DR is an mRuby and it doesn't have a gem system, and this is a gem, but I wonder what kind of things could cross-pollinate between those two. Just an interesting thought I had.
We've made some changes to support things like that better because of our WASM work. We have extracted into Lackey, which it doesn't have to be a gem, it could just be a collection of Ruby. The DSL specific stuff, not the WebView stuff. It's extracted. That's a separate display service.
Right.
So now, if you wanted to take Lackey and say, hey, I think that para size 12 should actually spit out, instead of some HTML, I think it should spit out whatever the Dragon Ruby dialect is.
Right.
Hey, I think that, and then there's para, caption, italicize, and then stack and do. If there's a way of drawing a box vertically and horizontally, you'd be like, okay, well, I think that stack should spit this out, and then it can, so that there's certainly potential, and that was our idea, is that this actually isn't tied to WebView at all. It's just the main thing that we've hacked on. You can
Perfect.
do different display services for desktop, and also we're doing the WASM work. And I think Dragon Ruby is an interesting discussion to have, right? Like Lackey just got extracted in the last 7 days. So
Wow.
yeah,
So yeah,
it's
I
something we're thinking about.
would be interested in kind of having that discussion, exploring that option. I may jump on your Discord at some point and start asking questions, because it's one of the things when I jumped over from the web dev scene, from the Rails career that I had into Dragon Ruby. One of the primary mental gaps that I had was coming from a CSS world where I could just say, put a button out, to, hey, you got to draw this button, right? You got to draw an outline, you got to put a font in it, you got to position it, So transitions like between those paradigms, I think could be assisted by, I think I'd be more familiar with the Scarpe type DSL as I'm moving myself into this other more towards the metal type of programming, right?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
So I'm just thinking that maybe, and you guys, I know there's some DR folks in the chat here. You guys may want to weigh in on what you think about the potential of having GUI wrappers for something like that. It's something we've been talking about in our guilds, is kind of GUI wrappers and stuff, and putting together like some best practice things and some libraries to help people with GUIs. But this,
if you so when you're talking about, like, say, a menu, right?
mm-hmm.
So say if you had a menu and you hit pause and it says paused, and then you have, like, let's say something simple, like 5 things that you can click on, like options, save, X. I'm just guessing, I'm not a DR person. I'm guessing as a game user. And yeah, because Shoes speaks GUI, right? Like that's the language it speaks. It doesn't speak, I say desktop, because I'm just trying to get to people that this isn't in a server out in the AWS. But it speaks GUI, right? And it's a way that when you look at it, if you've used Ruby for more than about an hour, I think you can infer pretty darn quickly what it's doing. And because, like, part of my, so the DR folks will totally get this because you're already thinking this way. But the thing I'll just throw out there for the web folks really quickly to, like, convince you, and if they're thinking, well, I can't make, let's just say internal tooling, right? So it's only going to be stuff that your people at your company are going to use, number one. Number two, you might have an M1 and you're paying for metal in New York as well, but you have this M1 just sitting there. Well, why can't it run your code locally and be a very fine machine to run it? And also web dev, reactivity. We've gotten so used to looking at HTML tags and CSS and JavaScript and jQuery days and React and stuff that we haven't thought about, like, how could reactivity, the 99% of the stuff you do, be really easy? If you look in there, that thing with the push the button, it's just like, you assign it to an IVAR, the button, and then later to that IVAR, you do dot replace. It might show I don't know if we have the button code, maybe a little higher up. Or maybe we're just, no, we're not showing you button. I mean, I won't go through the directories just yet, maybe a little later on.
Yeah.
But the DSL for it is literally what it is, because that's a Ruby ethos. How would you speak it? Like, I want the button to replace the text with hi. Okay. And then button dot click, text dot replace hi. Right? Like that's it. So going back to the DR stuff though, if anybody here wants to send me a snippet of I did get a license. I think that's what I need. I got it. I got it somehow.
Yeah.
I haven't played with it, but if you want to send me a snippet of, like, a menu that's very simple, even with a hello world or something to look at, please, I would be interested in, not even with our code, but seeing if there was a way to use that DSL to speak menu for DR. I'm very interested in that.
Nick, I've got the thing for you. I've got a whole open source project that I live code every Tuesday that you can, I will give you a link to it and you can look through all of it. It's got crappy menus. It's got bad Ruby code.
Tell
It's
me
got
which files I have to look at though.
yeah. Oh, sure.
Like the menu ones.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. But yeah, I think that's just an interesting bridge there that you've created, really, because that was one of the big mental leaps that I was having to make between my understanding and the way I did things in web dev and the way I need to do things in DR. So I think this could be a very interesting and good bridge for folks in that kind of space, right?
Because is it like I've looked at libui, GTK, some of these things with their Ruby bindings, so I know that how it feels like. I'm guessing this is similar, where you're like drawing a box, appending something to a box, setting a font, setting a size, setting a background, then and a lot of it is, and this isn't an insult to how it's written. I'm just saying the normal nature, the normal way desktop's done is challenging to understand, even if it is robust, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and Levi says making GUIs from scratch is more complicated than some may think at first. Absolutely. GUIs are a pain in the butt. Even when you have the tools to just plunk a button down and stuff, they're still hard to design.
Absolutely. So, yeah.
You know. So, yeah, we'll follow up on that. Levi, poke me in the Discord and remind me to get Nick involved with my OSS project and show him where he needs to go.
Would you be able to click into something on that GitHub really quick that I'd like to show people, to give them, and maybe zoom in? Just sorry to do that. I think there's absolutely one example that I think would really show what I'm talking. We won't run it. It's not a beautiful app, but it's one that I think really, I bet everyone, I'm not gatekeeping, I assume everyone on this call will get it. So if you go to examples and then you go to coffee.rb, just straight up there. So you can see we have all these collections, if you look in the folders, of ones that pass and don't pass. I don't know if you can bump that up 3 or 4 times. I don't know if people on the stream can quite see it or what the resolution's like, but even just like kind of squinting at it, we have a few things here, and I think that like this could get you started. So like copy paste one of these apps, do a git clone of what we have, bundle install, and then bundle exec Scarpe examples coffee.rb. I just said the words that you need to type into your terminal, and you should be good. Mileage may vary. Look at the ratio of implementation details to business logic here. So we have it's an app. Here's its title, here's its width, here's its height, everything's in the block. We have established a button, which is a coffee emoji, and then the para is the text, which is the sleepy emoji. When you have push.click, everything in there is a block that happens when that button is clicked, right? Now, we actually do some interesting Ruby unrelated to shoes here. So we have a PID that's established by actually spawning. I never write spawn in Ruby, by the way, ever. Right? This is Gregorio, who is a contributor, made this, and what spawn does is it starts a new process to the side, and it runs a command on your system. That's why I really like this. I like things that you can run commands. And for folks who don't know what caffeinate is, you folks may know, caffeinate stops your machine from sleeping, right? So once your machine is caffeinated, it replaces that emoji with wide awake emoji. But if the PID is nil, which means that it's whether or not it's been started, basically, it'll toggle it, right? Mm-hmm. So it'll kill the process, pass the PID to it, and make a sleepy face again, set the PID to nil. If the PID is nil, it'll turn on. So you can just click it. The app's not really interesting because it's literally like a little emoji button and a little emoji next to it, and it wakes, it goes to sleep. But every line of this, except for maybe the curly bracket in the end at the end, nearly every line of this says something to you. And it's not just a hello world. It does something that like might spawn your curiosity.
Yeah.
This is
I see what you did
favorite. There. Yeah, some of the other ones, they're a little longer with the grid layouts and stuff, and then that can be a little longer file. Not much, but this is the example I was at Brighton Ruby, and that's the example I looked at. But feel free to look around. If they're passing, they should be passing. There's the aha click. So that's the reactivity, right? Dot replace. That's all you have to do.
So yeah, and this is something that that I've struggled with as I'm trying to figure out the GUI system in DR. And it's not that it's wrong or anything. It's just that my brain is used to a different way of thinking about GUI.
You just said something wrong.
What?
You said there's the GUI system in Dragon Ruby. There is no GUI system.
That's right. The one I'm trying to create. That's exactly the problem.
Half of my development time is, okay, I need to design a window. I need to design a way to close it. I need to come up with a pane object. Those panes can have buttons themselves. To save a game, it's like, okay, I need to create a box. All right, it's going to be a field. I need to come up with a field class. It's like everyone's rolling their own UI library, essentially. And how far you go is based upon kind of the game's needs. So yeah, I mean, mine is going to be pretty UI heavy, what I'm working on. And therefore, I feel like I'm building a whole UI system.
Right.
Or and whole UI
that's
library.
interesting.
Yeah, there's no real GUIs aren't real. Levi, you're something else. There's no real concept of a click event either. It's so well, I mean, there's a concept of one, but you have to kind of build it yourself. You have to build your own kind of click event
heartbeats
system.
Or something? That thing.
It's a tick loop. So basically, Dragon Ruby runs inside a loop that runs 60 times a second to give you your 60 FPS, and every tick it's doing all the things. So every tick you got to check, did I click this button? It's not a push event type thing. It's a check, did I do this type thing. But I would think that there is a way to kind of fake that so that people who are used to event-driven implementations like that could easily transition their thinking into this loop structure instead. Because one of the things that I tried to do was, first button I made was button on click. That's not a thing. So, yeah, possible by the magic of abstraction. Exactly right.
I'd be interested to see, because the thing that was fun about exploring these different ways to do it is ChatGPT is trained on shoes. You need to remember here that just because things are like old and potentially dead to us, if they're old, they've been trained, and they existed. And the problem with ChatGPT is it often tells you about things that are long dead. I've asked for it to help me with software, and the software was deprecated 5 years ago, right? So I said, do you know shoes? It's like, oh, I know shoes. Sorry, my Northern Irish living here is coming. Oh, I know shoes. That's what Chat. I said, okay, well, write me this. And I was like, okay, yeah, that is correct. Shoes DSL, cool. I'm like, all right, well, take this and now write it for me in GTK. Okay, now write it for me in libui. Okay, now write it for me in HTML, JavaScript, CSS. And I was like, oh, I gave a talk at Brighton Ruby recently, and that's what I used as my slides. I'm like, here's how you write it. And it was similar to what you and Preston were saying about, obviously they are designed as a GUI system. And even then it is like, okay, you have an H box. Now what? Well, hold on to it, and you better remember your 10,000 things you have to do to it to make it look like a normal boring text box, right? I just think that web's gotten so much love and attention that it's not all for the best, but some of it's quite good. Like my bit's very good where I write. I think desktop is ripe for, I don't know, we're not going to build the next crazy thing, but my goodness, Caffeinate, you can kind of see the potential, right? Like if you can think about 3 or 4 interesting system commands, or maybe APIs that you could pipe together and then render them with at least bootstrap quality front end on a few lines, the utility could sell itself, right?
Right, and that's kind of where my thinking was with this kind of DR blending, is because it is a bunch of different kind of APIs that you put together, but it's hard to get a GUI gluing that stuff up. But that seems to be a constant struggle. It is for me anyway, and the folks that I've seen stream this stuff on a few occasions, like Creston, are constantly struggling with the GUI. That seems to be I get the logic, I get the ticks, but God, the GUI.
Are yourself or Creston able, is it too hard to literally just show a snippet of like a menu right now? Or is that too like much clicking around and stuff? I'm not pressuring you. We didn't rehearse this. Okay.
No, you guys talk amongst yourselves. I'll pull it up in a hot second.
So I mean, it's
well, essentially you have to store, so it's a 2D engine, so you have to store a rectangle in the location and size that, and define the, and basically this is the button. And what you're checking every tick is when you hit the mouse, has it intersected with where you drew that button?
Yeah.
So you have to say, has there been a collision essentially? And if so, that button is clicked. It's not like you can put a click event on a button, for example.
Do you do that with a?
So you would need
a listener that's waiting and saying, "Hey, any click?" Like every tick, is it checking any clicks in this zone? Any clicks in this zone?
I mean, essentially, you're doing that through code. So it's not an easy. Again, like Levi was saying, it's an abstraction that needs to be built. So the raw tools are there, but basically, yeah, you have to build everything yourself because there is not a pre-existing GUI library.
Right. So the way you have a tick thing, and I sent you the.
Oh, cheers! Thank you.
Yeah, so you can see this better than on a little tiny screen there. But so basically, you have a tick that runs, and that's your loop, 60 times a second, and then this arg state is kind of a container for all kinds of variables. That's a DR-ism. But then you create all these buttons, right? And these main menu buttons are things that I have defined as, they're basically hashes of properties.
Yeah.
And then sticking them in the primitives is how you render them. But then this try main menu click of this button. So every one of these buttons has to say, did I click? And so what that does is it comes down here and it says, okay, well, if you didn't click, go away and see if where my mouse clicked intersected the rectangle of this particular button object.
Wow.
So, and if it does, then send the button the method that I've
It's just a super low level. You essentially have no tool. Well, you have very basic tooling to be able to build whatever game you want to. But if you're talking about GUIs, there's no UI library. There's no DSL as Shoes has to be able to do all of this grunt work.
So is there, on line 18, did you define button defs? Have you written button defs, or is that something that DR gives you?
No, that's a me thing.
Oh my goodness, you're doing the work, and then we can just hook this up with Lackey to Scarpe to Shoes. Like, no, but literally copy paste I don't know if it'd be that easy, but like, or honestly, if you can. No, I'm just thinking about like, let me make it even easier. Forget about my code. I don't even care about my code, but I care about the DSL. I have taken, like talking to ChatGPT, for example, it knows libui really, really well, the Ruby bindings. And I would literally start rewriting Scarpe, but like raw, where like def para would literally spit out a chunk of text that was valid libui code. And then we'd build this text into a giant wall of text and eval it. Do you see where I'm going with this? And I would be building my code file, and then I have a ball of text and I've evaled it, and now it's the valid code I wanted. I mean, we get to do crazy stuff, right? So you could literally just look at the DSL and use that as your inspiration for what I think you've already started. So what would Def Para be for you on the inside? You probably don't even have to, you could just use this, like write it directly in your code, right?
Yeah.
I say just.
Well, yeah.
Anyway, that's cool.
Maybe. Because this is all button defs is I just defined all these things, and they're essentially just, here's what my method is for my on-click method is called, and here is the definition of what this button looks like. And so
the
they're
callback method is what you want to have happen when it's clicked, right?
Right.
So it would literally be your like button dot click block and then put the method in there in Scarpe. Like I can literally see the. Okay, anyway, you got me too excited. I didn't know we were going to talk about Dragon Ruby today, so that's cool.
Cool. Well, I'm excited too.
I can't be nerd sniped any more than I am.
Yeah, right. So bang, nerd snipe to you. Right. But yeah,
folks who are watching this, get on this immediately. All right. You've seen the code. I think, is it public?
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
guessing if you just
get
that code, Scarpe, let's shoesitize it. You don't even have to use my library. Forget my library. You can use it for tips, but like, it's just, this is the way, I think. And again, Glimmer is very good. I keep wanting to say that because someone has spent a lot of their lifeblood and energy into Glimmer.
Yeah.
But we're playing a different game here. So if you want to play our game,
right,
that's how to do it. Yeah.
But I think I think this is a thing about how to think about setting up GUI systems, which you have done a lot of. You've done a lot of that thinking. How do you set these up? That's not a place where my brain is, right?
But you could just take one method, right? You could literally say, all right, how does button work? And I want to write button in that, hopefully close to that way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I was just, I was looking at Scarpe going, this is really applicable to the stuff I'm trying to deal with in Dragon Ruby. So, this makes me want to kind of go look at a lot of other gems that are out in the Ruby ecosphere and say, what can I learn from those to apply to Dragon Ruby in this much different way of thinking about Ruby than web dev, right?
And you're very lucky because I don't want to say back end because your display service that you're trying to talk to is already Ruby. You're not trying to make Ruby foist HTML into a desktop. You're not trying to foist WASM. You're not trying to do anything. You're just like, hey, I've already got some Ruby that I'd like to be in a certain abstraction.
Yeah.
Oh, well, here's some Ruby that looks like that, So.
Yeah. Oh man, this is very well. Now I'm all excited. And of course we're out of time because now that we're talking about really exciting stuff is when the time goes up.
That happens.
Yeah, it happens. But yeah, I'll probably reach out to you some, Nick, over the Discords and see if I can follow up with you on this and get some ideas of how to use this bridge here, because I think this is
I'll just, can I do my shout out, what movie are you promoting? One more time. Join scarpe.schwad.org. Join scarpe.schwad.org. Get in the Discord, anybody who wants to, including you, Chris, because I am off Wednesday, Thursday, Friday next week, only doing Scarpe. You don't have to, I know you have a life and work and everything, but I will just be having fun in a disorganized way with Scarpe all day long, each day. And
awesome.
If people want to come, there'll be Google Meet or a Meet or something 3 times a day. There'll be so for time zones, there'll be chats in the channel in the Discord. Even if people don't want to even do any work, but look at there's a theme of music. But if it's a good time to geek out about it, because it could be 3 people, but it could possibly be, well, no, at least be 4 or 5 people, but it could be more than 4 or 5. So.
Cool. Yeah. So you DR folks that are here, join us over there. I'm already a member of that Discord, but go over there and let's talk about this, because this could be an interesting thing. Wildfire says, is it possible to write display service implementation that will render all the stuff in DR? I don't see why not.
display service is a separate thing. I know we don't have any big, beautiful alternatives to WebView, but you can see, like, I already took a stupid stab at Glimmer and Lit's Ruby libui is a display service. So you can see, like, not very good proper code attempts. You'll see that we have 3 running display services technically, even though WebView is the big proper one. I don't honestly. The answer to your question is probably it would be hard, but like, give it a look. Let's look. Right? Like, I don't know about DR, but y'all do. Let's goof around.
Yeah. So, oh, and by the way, Wildfire is the one that put together the awesome map generating stuff with the WFC that I showed earlier at the beginning of the show. So, thank you for that, Wildfire. I sat and watched that video like 20 times yesterday because it was just blowing my mind. But yeah, I don't have time for this either, but it's exciting. So I'll figure out a way to do it. All right. So thank you so much, Nick, for coming and joining us today. That was a really fun talk. I appreciate you being here. And thank you for the work that you were doing on Scarpe. It's really, really good stuff, and I'm excited about it.
Cheers. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Chat, if you enjoyed that, please like, subscribe, follow. If you're seeing this on Twitch or YouTube, just mash all the buttons and ding all the bells. Helps us out a lot. That's the best thing you can do. Also, tell all your beautiful, wonderful friends about us and bring them too so that they can learn things and have fun along with us. Don't forget that tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. GMT, Creston's live streaming some DR dev. And then I will be doing the same thing next Tuesday, working on that goofy little thing that we were showing here. And then next week, on Thursday for the Rubber Duck Dev Show, we've got Coda coming back on with us to talk about how to evaluate your tools. And we're not talking about how to buy the best hammer in Lowe's. We're talking about, how to evaluate your technical tools. So that's fun. Coda's a really fun guy. I enjoyed talking to him, so that'll be a fun time. So we'll be back then. Once again, thank you, Nick, so much for coming. Chat, thank you for being here. And Andrew, welcome. We will, well, Creston will see you guys tomorrow. I'll probably be hanging out there in the chat anyway, so I'll see you too. But we will be there, and thank you so much. And until next time, happy programming.
Happy programming.